it's here. In the commentary box, the dynamic duo that we believe is the best in the business. John Watson and Ben Edwards. Ben, I want that 20 quid as soon as we're off air, all right?
I'll have it for you, Matt, don't worry. Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Great to have your company once again. We're all set for the morning free practice, and that, of course, will lead into qualifying here at Monza this afternoon. Michelin looking in good shape yesterday, certainly apart from the two Ferraris, and perhaps they've come up with a better tyre for qualifying as opposed to the race. Perhaps it'll go the other way in race conditions and the Bridgestone tyre will be better. That's all to be determined, but today we will watch that build-up and that all-important qualifying session this afternoon. John, it does promise to be another exciting event, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, and I think that a lot of the teams, particularly the Bridgestone teams outside of Ferrari, will hope that their tyres are going to come in a lot sooner. We heard Giancarlo Fisichella say yesterday that it was taking up to 3 laps to get a time out of that tyre. Now, if you're going to go and do a qualifying run, that's going to inhibit what you potentially can do. So I expect the track is going to come to the teams. There's been more running in it after the Formula 1 cars arrived, and then, of course, with these two 45-minute sessions this morning. Right now, temperatures are very comfortable. They're slightly on the cool side, but that will start to raise, particularly towards the end of the second part of the 45-minute session. Then the 2-hour gap before qualifying, and at 1 o'clock, well, let's hope they've got the type of track temperatures that they need, as well as fans, spectators that are going to enjoy what I believe should be a very, very exciting and high-speed qualifying session here for tomorrow's Italian Grand Prix.
Well, the weather conditions are looking pretty good at Monza this morning, I have to say. Bright and cheerful. It doesn't look as though we've had any of that overnight rain that we saw leading into yesterday's free practice session. Temperatures coming up slightly. That could change the balance a little bit between Bridgestone and Michelin. So lots of imponderables, and it'll all be determined as we go throughout the course of today. Now, we're watching the Sauber drivers getting ready. You might get a little bit of an opportunity to watch them putting on that HANS device in a moment, the head and neck support system. The two Sauber drivers are running it for the first time at a Grand Prix meeting this weekend. We talked to Nick Heidfeld on the programme yesterday, asked him about how he felt it was going, and he said it was pretty good. They had some problems. He had a big bruise on his shoulder, which had been caused by the sort of first version of it, or an earlier version, but they now got that sorted out. He was a bit more comfortable using it, and it basically there around the neck and over the shoulders of the driver to protect him in case of an accident, to stop the head moving around too much. Looking down over the circuit, you can see it is a glorious morning here at Monza, and we're taking a ride round of the helicopter, just gone through the second chicane effectively, and going now through the Curva Grande.
No, this is
sorry,
into Lesmo.
Yes, sorry.
This is the first of the two Lesmos, a corner that is, like many of the corners here at Monza, been revised and has been tightened on the exit. And then you have that short sprint down into Lesmo 2. That's where we saw David Coulthard. In fact, there are still the marks on the track for David. The team don't know whether it was a driver error or whether it was a mechanical problem. It looks to me as if David maybe rode the white line, got the rear brakes locked on, that just turned the car around. And now we've got this turn, this long run out of that second Lesmo all the way down underneath the tunnel that used to carry part of the banked section of this Monza. It was a combination road track and bank track. There it is, very frightening, very, very bumpy, and then down into this final third chicane, the Ascari chicane.
Yeah, this is a fast corner, this one, and the driver's really relishing the challenge of this. Jacques Villeneuve in particular talking about how he enjoys this corner. You have to carry a lot of speed in. First part of it's almost faster than the second part. Then they come out of that, another long straight. This is the fourth time that they're up to over 200 miles an hour around this Monza circuit, and that really is what dictates this track and why it's different to so many of the others. Virtually every other track now on the calendar, 4 areas where they're up to over 200 miles an hour. 220 was the best we saw yesterday, and then they're on the brakes into the final corner here, the Parabolica.
Great corner, one of those corners you get a feeling you brake quite late. The entry speed in relative terms isn't that high, but it's a very, very long opening exit, so you can get on the power hard. The car just runs virtually by that outside line to, I mean, you saw Pedro de la Rosa going over that line. His back end, the back end of the car broke away. But ordinarily it's a corner where you get on the power, you can feed the power in fairly early and just balance the car on steering and throttle. And by the time you actually straighten up and are heading onto pit straight, you're doing certainly the best part of 170, even 180 miles an hour.
Don't think David Coulthard will be too impressed with the turn-in of the helicopter. He wants a bit more response from his McLaren when he's out there. He'll be hoping to make up for some of that lost time suffered with the spin yesterday down at the Lesmos. Fisichella Well, they were fast across the speed traps yesterday, the two Jordan Hondas, but it didn't really translate into particularly quick lap times, with Fisichella down in 11th place and Takuma Sato in 14th position. So they know they've got some work to do here this weekend. They know it's going to be a little bit of a battle for them, particularly to try and get into the top 10. Qualified 14th at Spa, following on from that excellent 5th place on the grid at Hungary a few weeks ago. There is Takuma Sato, and as Jordan tells us, Giancarlo has the spare car set up for himself. Can't use the spare car this morning, of course. Once we get into qualifying, that's their first opportunity to use the spare.
Yes, and Honda, as we mentioned in that little pre-race piece, that their reliability here so far has been much better, but it's a totally different nature of racetrack. Although you've got a lot of full throttle opening, probably now the greatest of any of the Grand Prix circuits, varying between 65 and 70% depending on which team or engine manufacturer you listen to. But there's not the kind of corners that we saw in Eau Rouge. We get that huge compression, you get huge G-forces, and that was the cause of all those major engine failures that Honda suffered 2 weekends ago.
So here we are, all set to go, just waiting for the countdown and the green light to come on at the end of the pit lane. And Takuma Sato will lead them out onto the track by the looks of things. One of the Toyotas, I think that's Alan McNish, just joining into the queue as well. Had problems with his gearbox yesterday. They actually completed a very quick gearbox change, back end change in fact, on the car, whole rear end of the car, very quickly indeed. But it wasn't a great day for him.
You know, that you would expect that of a team that was formerly a World Rally Championship team, and the ability to remove and replace parts in that activity is pretty vital. And of course, if you can transfer that technology and that design into a Formula One car, well, it does give you some advantages.
So Eddie Irvine on track immediately as well after that good run yesterday, but trying to sort out braking problems that he suffered during the day. Let's see whether today, with comparable fuel loads, particularly when we get into qualifying, whether he can match that sort of performance. He did qualify well at Spa last time out, remember, 8th place on the grid, and that was a large part of the 6th position that he managed to score in the race itself. So the Jaguar ran well at Spa in official qualifying. We'll have to see if they can do similar this time.
Well, the nature of the Monza circuit should play to their strengths, and one of their strengths is they've got a very good engine. The second strength is they've got Michelin tyres, which we already feel is probably the better of the two tyres for teams like Jaguar. Forget about Ferrari, they're on a different planet, and as I say, it wouldn't matter what you put on the Ferrari, I think it would still be a pretty quick car. And Irvine, very experienced, tends to sort of maybe lead too much from the front with the verbals, but when it comes to driving a racing car, he still has got speed, and as long as he feels he's got a competitive car, is capable of delivering the kind of performances which Jaguar employed him for in the first place back in 2000.
Rubens Barrichello looking happy and cheerful this morning. He wasn't looking too pleased yesterday morning at the end of the first session. He'd only completed 2 laps, and that was because they had a brake problem. They had to bleed the brake system on his car. It didn't matter too much. Of course, many of these teams had been testing at Monza last week, so they had a lot of experience. But for the Bridgestone runners, they did try and do quite a lot of laps yesterday, because Bridgestone have brought a different tyre to the one they brought here to the tests. Schumacher in particular, I think that was a large part of him wanting to do so many laps, was to go through the engine programme. So quite a few cars out there at the moment. And talking of Ferrari, we haven't seen either of them out on track just yet, and that's fairly typical. Michael and Rubens usually some of the last to go out. But Nick Damon has caught up with a very important man at Ferrari, the man in charge of the engine development side of things, Paolo Martinelli.
From Ferrari, the head of engine development. I believe you have a radical new step this weekend?
No, we have just an evolution that was in schedule for Monza, and as expected we are here to try to improve, but it's really a small step.
Looking to next year, will you be designing again another new engine, or are you looking more in the evolutionary trail?
Well, a new engine as usual, we use winter time, but is the only, can say, a relative wide gap where we can do something new for the architecture of the engine, but in terms of concept will be an evolution of the current engine.
When do you start working towards 2004 and obviously the new 1 engine per weekend rule, or are you already doing work?
Well, at the moment we are just start thinking of that, but we are concentrated on the preparation of the engine for 2003, and then after that we shall start to think to 2004.
But are you in favour of those rules, or would you rather see them amended?
Well, I think it is something that we think it's positive for limit the continuous improvement, and also is an interesting challenge for a motor engineer.
Paolo, thank you very much.
So Paolo Martinelli talking, and it's good to see Ross Brawn is back on the pit wall here today. He's been suffering some back pain and has had some medical treatment to sort that out. Wasn't here yesterday, but he's back in familiar position here today.
Yes, good to see Ross back on the pit wall, and obviously such an integral part of the success of this team over so many years. And well, it would be awful to think that he wasn't missed yesterday, and that's one of the problems when somebody of such a key role in the team is not there, and the team is still, well, it's great for the team that they've got that ability to continue as it is aware without Ross's presence, but I believe that Ross being on the pit wall is a significant and valuable contribution to what will take place here today, but most certainly tomorrow afternoon.
Yes, the master strategist is Ross Brawn, and of course what a tremendous career of working with this man, Michael Schumacher. He has been a part of Michael's World Championships both at Benetton and at Ferrari, and they have an incredibly close relationship, a working relationship and a close friendship too, which has meant that the success has just been coming all the time, particularly this year. Of course, 10 wins for Michael Schumacher. He's broken that record, and this weekend he'll try and extend it even further with an 11th win. He's looking for his 6th pole position of the season, and of course Juan Pablo Montoya has had 6 pole positions already this year, and if it's going to be a track that Williams might be able to snatch the advantage in qualifying once again, it may well be this one at Monza.
Yes, I think that this is the nature of the circuit. Tyres work very well, BMW horsepower still equal if not top of the class, and Juan Pablo Montoya, very powerful, good memories of being here 1 year ago. That win, that maiden and only Grand Prix victory for the Colombian. No doubt he'll want to return to the podium and get off. He should have been really in contention all year in this championship. For a variety of reasons that's not happened, and he's had his teammate at least winning 1 Grand Prix for Williams, doing very well in terms of points in the championship. Juan Pablo Montoya wants to get back on level terms with Ralf Schumacher.
Yes, indeed, and Montoya actually talking before he came to the event this weekend was saying that he's still, of course, he's got the bottle of champagne unopened from last year because there was no champagne spraying on the podium last year after the events of September the 11th. It was a muted affair, if you remember. So Juan Pablo still has his full bottle of champagne, and as you said, that's a bit of a rarity. In some ways, I think he might well keep it that way, because to win a Grand Prix and to maintain a full bottle of champagne, unopened bottle, it's quite rare these days.
Yes, it is. It's normal to see the champagne being open, sprayed, and then the bottle, remnants of it, handed down to the various team members that are waiting below the podium. So Juan Pablo having that bottle, it would be nice for him to keep it as it is, the foil and the cork in place, and that could be one of the real, well, it will be. It was his first Grand Prix win. Those mementos maybe don't mean very much to a driver at the beginning of a career, and there will be many more successes to follow, but that first one, that's one little area where he may just choose to say, well, that bottle of champagne will remain unopened as long as I'm in a position to keep it.
Niki Lauda, former winner here at Monza. Indeed, John, you guys ended up with a 1-2 finish here at Monza some years ago, although it wasn't quite how it finished on the road. No,
we've actually finished 3rd and 4th on the road, but Gilles Villeneuve and Mario Andretti had a great battle, and that battle started before the flag, or the lights in those days, whatever it was, were dropped, and they jumped the start so blatantly that they both were penalised, in fact disqualified, and Nicky and I came through from 3rd and 4th to become 1st and 2nd. But it was one of those very sad weekends, because that was the weekend when Ronnie Peterson had a huge accident and tragically slipped away on that Sunday evening due to an embolism caused by severe leg injuries, and I think that cast a shadow over Monza, which to this day many people still feel is here.
A very sad day, and of course there have been other tragedies at Monza in the past. Wolfgang von Trips as well, also killed here back in the 60s, so it's seen a huge amount of course, the history of this place is one of the key parts of Monza.
Yes, but I think probably the most ironic one of all was in 1970 when Jochen Rindt had just effectively become world champion. He didn't become world champion because Jack Yeeks was still in the position, but he was the first and only posthumous world champion. And a huge accident coming into Parabolica again back in 1970, no chicanes. So the run from the Lesmo corners, Lesmo 2, all the way down through the Vialoni, Curva Vialoni, which is now the Ascari chicane. So that was just a flat-out blast down that. Jochen Rindt had taken the wings, the front and rear wings, off his Lotus 72. And no doubt the car very quick in a straight line, but also probably a lot less stable under braking. And the consequence was a very heavy accident which lost Jochen.
So there has been a great deal of sadness over the years at Monza, but a great deal of high points as well and success. Mark Webber on track in the Minardi now, and of course he's joined once again this weekend by Alex Jung as his teammate. The Malaysian driver did a good job yesterday. He did end up spinning at the Ascari chicane. He said they made some changes to set up, made the car more nervous, but he put in a good number of laps up to that point, and in fact he was faster than Webber for quite a large part of yesterday's session. Webber working particularly on race setup, I think, whereas Jung perhaps working a little bit more on qualifying, which has been a tricky part for him. Now let's just ride.
Listen to the traction control, really relying on that traction control, not being as aggressive in the curbs you saw in turn 1 and the first chicane, then into the second chicane, just not being as aggressive as other drivers on the track. Now exiting the second of the 2 Lesmos, and this another high-speed run down to the third chicane. Well, certainly buzzed the engine on the downshifts up to 17,000.
It's interesting, it seems to rev higher, doesn't it, in the lower gears, and then when you get up to the higher gears, it doesn't rev quite so high. Changing up at around sort of 16.5, 16 of the higher gears, but in the lower gears it seems to change up at nearly 18,000.
Yeah, well, sometimes the engineers can do this, that it helps engine longevity. In the short gears, the engines rev very quickly, you get immediate acceleration, but in the longer gears, then when you're putting a longer, heavier load into the engine, they reduce the limit just to reduce the stresses on the engine. And of course, all these things are compromises. You wouldn't expect to see, well, BMW or Ferrari doing that, certainly not in qualifying. And, well, Juan Pablo, clearly your mind is on one thing, and that's getting into your car.
Well, Connie Fradel there with him as he prepares to come out for this free practice session. We've only got 3 cars on track currently, so people taking their time. It is quite cool at the moment, although temperatures likely to increase a little more today with some bright sunshine and blue sky. Kimi Räikkönen down there in the McLaren pit, but while it's all a little bit quiet, Nick Damon has caught up with the man who runs day-to-day operations at Toyota, Ange Pasquale.
Ange Pasquale from Toyota, a very mixed day for yesterday. Good results for Mika in 6th, but strange problems for Alan, especially he was complaining about an imbalance when you tested the last week.
Actually, we were very surprised because we couldn't find the balance we had last week. It was very strange, so our engineers have checked the car and we think we have fixed the problem. Beyond that, Alan has got also a gearbox problem yesterday, so it was a really misfortune for him yesterday. We hope everything is fixed today, and we're very confident to bring him back upwards. Concerning Mika, it has been a very good day and very promising. We hope that we will continue on the same direction this morning and optimize the car for qualifying.
Is it really just a case that the car likes low downforce?
Well, for sure, Monza is not a secret. You have to go low downforce to optimize the speed. This is what we do. And at the moment we have got a good advantage of our engine. We hope that this will be also very important this afternoon, because as you know, we with the chassis we're not as good we are with the engine, and we hope that the combination between the aero for this afternoon and the engine will be good enough to be at least in the top 10.
Ange, thank you very much.
So team manager at Toyota giving us the lowdown on what's going on for the team. Michael Schumacher's on track though, so let's keep an eye on what he's up to. He was fastest yesterday, if you remember, a 1:22.433. He was only 0.2 of a second or so off last year's pole record set by Juan Pablo Montoya.
And no surprise at all, he's just over half a second quicker in that first 26-second segment, and pretty much a straightforward part of the racetrack. Now you're coming into the more difficult part, these 2 Lesmo corners, and this is where you can see the advantage that Ferrari has. The car is superb in these middle speed corners. as well as having just well, everywhere in the racetrack. The car is fantastic. Expect to see maybe a second and a half up. Well, 1.3, he gained 1.2 seconds in that sector, and then he'll probably pick up another 3/4 of a second down this long straight where the power of that Ferrari engine and the aerodynamics will come into play. Then through Parabolica corner again, where entry speed is critical because it will dictate how soon you can get on the throttle and how early you want to get that power down.
Here we are then, riding with Michael. We've got the camera inside the wing mirror here as he flashes across the line, fastest with a 1:23.319, just the matter of 2.3 seconds faster than anybody else. But, well, we're about a second off what he did yesterday, but only to be a second off at this early stage is still pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's... you can have for all the racetracks. You cannot put any more aerodynamics on a car. At least you would certainly see cars moving around very much more than we do where they've got a high downforce setup. Now watch Michael, can he brake? No, 22.5, so he's within 1/10 of a second of what he did yesterday on his second flying lap this morning.
That's pretty rapid stuff. The Ferrari fans, the Tifosi, will have plenty to cheer about.
But just going back to that sort of aerodynamic theme, and one of the difficulties that people have is that because of the sophistication of aerodynamics, the fact that Ferrari are now operating 2 wind tunnels, and of course all the computing that goes along with it, the technology that's being evolved, the role of a driver is still the important part of a Grand Prix car, but it's all being, let's say, masked by what the engineers are doing. Imagine a setup like this on somewhere like Monte Carlo. At least you might see a little bit overtaking at Monte Carlo, and you would certainly see a lot more movement from the car.
Yeah, sliding around into the barriers, that would be great fun to watch. Kimi Räikkönen we're on board with now, and of course raced here last year for the Sauber team. Both Saubers qualified in the top 10 last year when he was teammate to Nick Heidfeld, and now this year we'll see what he can do. Fantastic second place on the grid last time out at Spa. I wonder if he's going to be able to do anything like that here today. It'll be a tougher target, I think, at Monza.
but it's in the corners. Well, Ralf Schumacher decides to abandon the lap, comes in. But it's in that sector where you've got the two, I would call them middle speed corners, the first and second Lesmos, that the Michelin-Williams BMW combination isn't quite as strong.
So let's keep an eye on Raikkonen,
Oh,
although
he's dropped off. He's backed off.
Yes.
Maybe he got traffic. Maybe he had an error somewhere in the two Lesmos. But certainly he was the fastest of all so far in Sector 1.
So he's backed off now, and he'll be heading back into the pits. 11 cars on track. It's Michael Schumacher ahead of the two Williams BMW drivers. Coulthard's just looking to improve, and here's Barrichello on circuit now, having solved their braking problems yesterday. Barrichello, this is his first flying lap, so I wonder where this is going to put him. His first flying lap, not that quick, as you can see, 2.5 seconds nearly off Michael Schumacher's pace today. But it might be a quick lap next time. It looked like he might indeed have had to pass the car of Felipe Massa, who's right behind him in the Sauber.
Yes, I think a little bit of traffic coming up into that third chicane. Felipe Massa now sitting into the rear wing of the Ferrari and hope that he can pick up something. But David Coulthard is looking to see if he can find improvement as well. He's running behind these two cars. Barrichello comes across, makes a small improvement, goes 17th. It's insignificant, it's unimportant. But for Coulthard, well, it will be. He's on the 23.9. That's his best lap. Here he comes. And they go straight into the pits, so David Coulthard, in spite of improvements in top speed in first and second sector and a personal best in first sector, the team decide, come in David, we want to make some changes.
Yeah, he had some good speeds, as you say.
Because we're carrying a lot more than the other car, maybe with the weight where it is, we need to be starting to move the aero rearward slightly.
Blow up for Rubens Barrichello.
Well, how about that? They're
That's
running.
not he seized the engine actually coming. So that's a disappointment and a surprise. I don't know whether there's maybe more surprise or disappointment, to be honest.
This is the new engine, of course, John, that Paolo Martinelli, well, the new bits and pieces that he was talking to us earlier about. They have made some developments for this race, for qualifying, and that will be one of those qualifying engines in the back, and it obviously hasn't lasted long.
Red lights, pit lane exits closed, so they want to get that car assist on the exit of the Curva Grande before you come into that second chicane. There's no easy way to remove the car, so red flags, and this session is going to be temporarily brought to a halt.
So there's a little bit of drama for the Tifosi, for the Ferrari fans, and indeed for the Ferrari team. Not many laps, so in fact it was only his second flying lap there for Rubens Barrichello, and it's seized at the back end of the car. Now, I'm presuming it's engine, of course it might be gearbox, but that smoke coming out the back as it all seized up did look characteristic of an engine failure.
Oh, I think there's no doubt that was an engine. We've seen them go. We've got enough view of that in Belgium, and look, smoke pouring through any orifice between that. I mean, there's not very much space. It can only between, well, I don't even, it's probably coming out of the radiators and all over the place. That's a significant and major engine failure. Let's watch and see. Here he goes. Watch it. Here she goes. There she goes. The left bank. Let's go. Rubens immediately backs off. But of course, at the astronomical RPM that these engines are turning over, and that's the moment Rubens tries to grab. I'm sure he's trying to grab the clutch levers, pushing buttons, doing everything possible. Watch, the car will then sort of slew. There it is. That's when the back wheels finally lock up.
And the smoke comes pouring over the front rather than being pushed behind by the wind. So Barrichello, his session coming to an early end this morning, and of course they'll try and get that car back to the pits, but it's valuable setup time being lost.
Well, yes, it is for Rubens Barrichello, but to get that car removed to safety, they may well want to put a wrecker on the track to get it removed. There isn't any obvious place, as Luciano Berti just rubs his chin and thinks, whoa, I did thousands of kilometres with that engine, no problem at all. So right. Can they find somewhere behind the barriers to ensure the Ferrari is... I'm sure they want to get that car picked up and brought back to the pits.
So Barrichello just giving a little bit of a wave to the fans here. The Ferrari fans certainly will be a bit disappointed to have seen him expire like that in the early stages. Now, we know that Monza is a testing track on engines, particularly. We've just seen it there for Rubens Barrichello, but it's not only testing on engines, it's also very testing on brakes, because at 4 areas of the track, as we said earlier, they're braking from over 200 miles an hour. So the brake guys have to do an awful lot of work. Nick Damon's caught up with one of them, Steve Bryan from AP Racing.
Steve Bryan, another tricky circuit for brakes here. Long braking under low downforce. A particular challenge?
I didn't hear what you said there, sorry about that.
The hard braking on low downforce, a particular challenge?
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, there's an awful lot of energy goes into the brakes in a lap round Monza, which is why it's also very hard on fuel, heavy on fuel round here. So anywhere where you've got those sort of speed differentials is going to be tough, yeah.
Now, one of your main drivers, Eddie Irvine from Jaguar, is the only person who specifically complained about a brake problem. Have you got to the bottom of that? Because no one else is using your calipers has a problem, it seems.
He's actually using Brembo's. So if he switched back to our calipers, I might be able to fix it for him.
Is it usual for teams to have two different manufacturers at their disposal?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Is it usual for teams to have two different manufacturers at their disposal, that sort of thing?
They're a fairly fickle bunch. There's not a lot of loyalty, so they will switch to and fro. They've had some problems with the car this year, and you know, in the course of trying to sort them out, they've decided to try the Brembo caliper rather than ours. So we'll see how it goes.
Very smart. Thank you, Steve.
Well, a great interview there.
That was a prize. I mean, your worst nightmare as an interviewer, ask the question, and then to sort of get caught with the Brembo brake. I mean, Eddie has had brake problems, and you do jump around from different brake manufacturers, AP and Brembo. It's all about feel as well as it is braking performance, and Eddie's looking for, it's the feel I think he's looking for as much as it is performance. And if you're getting a long pedal, particularly, and you're braking at high speeds into these low-speed chicanes, you want to know that the pedal is there, but at the same time, you don't want a pedal that is lifeless or no feel. So maybe Eddie's being hypercritical and sensitive, but if that's what makes him quick, well then he's got to get what he wants.
Well, the fan's getting a good close-up view of Rubens on his way back on the scooter as his car is left beside the track. Just talking about those speeds, the speed trap that we've seen so far, Raikkonen actually fastest, again probably with the benefit of a tow. We did see him on that quick lap behind another car, but that's brought him up to 223 miles per hour now.
Felipe, the front is much too high for a reason that we know.
I wonder if they knew we were listening in there. The front is much too high for the reason that we know. Well, we don't know the reason, and they're not going to let us know.
Well, if you're talking about the front of the car, clearly it's going to be an aerodynamic thing, and
If you can go a bit less than 5, you can go ahead. But if we have to find 1 more million,
A little bit of discussion there.
Yeah, I wanted to listen in on that one, because any discussion with Pierre Dupasquier and Ron Dennis is not going to be about the weather. That was clearly a very business-like discussion, and as we cut back to watching Rubens' car being pushed away to safety, and that I don't know if they want to try. There is probably a barrier access behind, just at the exit of the second chicane. There it is.
Well, hopefully we can find out a bit more about this situation. Press officer Luca Collegiani from Ferrari is talking to Peter Windsor.
Well, that was a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, it happens sometimes that we have an engine problem. It's clear. It was a pity because Rubens will miss the remaining part of this first half of the session. Anyway, we have time to recover, and also it is important that last week we made a lot of testing here, so we have a lot of data which doesn't make this so serious.
Presumably that was a fresh engine fitted last night?
Yeah, we have an engine with something new, not something very big, but something new. For
a few more revs?
Something new.
Well, I'm sure the mechanics will do a good job. How long is what is the best engine change time you've ever had?
Oh, sorry, we don't have a book of records for this. Well, for sure we will be ready. No problem at all.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
There's a little look at the remnants or the spill from that engine failure of Rubens Barrichello, and hopefully they get that cleaned up. Although the pit lane exit is now open, the track has reopened, and we're all set for the 21 minutes remaining in this session now to get underway and out onto the track. A number of cars already coming straight out onto the circuit.
Yes, everybody's got a very tight agenda of work to get through, because they know that when this second part begins, then they have to make those decisions which will reflect on qualifying and of course in the race, and that's principally about tyre choice. And I don't know whether the tyre choice is as clear cut as it is at some other circuits, because in the case of both tyre companies, the tyres in terms of time is not a great deal, maybe in terms of wear or in terms of degradation, so it's going to be a critical decision, and we may well see teams, drivers preferring to go for something which is slightly more conservative in terms of an out-and-out lap time that will work for them come Sunday afternoon.
So Jarno Trulli, let's see whether they can get the Renault up into the top 10 again. They were both in the top 10 yesterday, Button and Trulli, and they were a little more happy than they thought they would be. They always thought they might struggle a touch here. The Renault engine, not the most powerful out there, they'll acknowledge that. But they did a good number of laps working hard on getting the setup of the car right. And of course, it's not just about engine power, it's about other things. And off goes, it is Webber that time who's gone off. Yes, Mark Webber.
Yes, and that's in Lesmo 1, again, an unusual part of the track to see somebody going off. So Mark Webber getting it all wrong. I mean, look how far he went off track. So being called in by the team. And Mark looked like he didn't even really make a turn. I suspected a very sudden snap oversteer. So that's third of these cars coming in. Let's watch and see. Oh, he just locked it up, the front brakes. So that's always one of the problems drivers have to be aware of when they go out after a period in the pits, that the balance temperature front to rear is equalised, and maybe Mark didn't achieve that quite so well, so that front lock up, and he just went straight off.
Alan McNish was behind him, but wasn't any problem. McNish managed to turn in as Webber was going off. So I'm sure they'll get that sorted out and get Webber back out on track very quickly once again. And everybody just trying to get a bit of temperature up once more. Jarno Trulli attacking the curbs, as you have to do here at Monza. And now beginning to pick up the speed a little bit more through Lesmo 1. Now coming up to the second Lesmo.
It's interesting watching the Renault through Lesmo 1. Quite a lot of understeer in that first part of the Lesmo two-part corner. Mika Salo running behind in the Toyota. And Salo hopefully trying to pick up a little bit of an aerodynamic too, particularly come out of the exit of this third chicane and run down into Parabolica, but he's not close enough behind, in fact, to get anything of any worth.
So heading down, you can see the green flag still being waved to indicate that the session is underway properly. Full timing is in operation once again. Eddie Irvine is now putting in some quicker laps. He's only done 5 laps so far, Irvine. He's actually last of all, 20th at the moment, so we'll expect to see some improvements from him coming up in just a moment. Salo goes 10th fastest in the Toyota. Not very happy yesterday. He's still smarting somewhat from the decision of Toyota to drop him from the team for next year. By all accounts, he's still going to be earning quite well out of it, but because it's still part of an ongoing contract, but he won't be driving for the team, and he didn't seem to be at all happy about that when he was in interviews yesterday.
Yeah, we saw that interview this morning, and in fact that's the best of the interview, because the rest of it was just swearing and more swearing. So I think he's had 2 weeks of a sort of mull in his mind, and maybe he isn't ready to retire, as he stated in Belgium, and maybe he is still a racing driver at heart, and maybe he's not happy, but he has been given, we understand, a fairly substantial payday to take a walk. And whether he wanted to take the money or stay in the team, I think he really would like to stay in the team for a third year.
Best time so far today, 1 minute 22.538. That's been set by Michael Schumacher, of course, only about a tenth of a second away from what he did yesterday. Just interesting looking at the times and the potential times. If they can improve down into the 1 minute 21s, and indeed if they got down to 1 minute 21 flat, that would actually give us an average lap speed here at Monza of 160 miles per hour. So the improvements gaining all the time. That would be a great mark to beat in qualifying today, if they can crack that 160 mile an hour average speed for the lap.
That would be, I think, pretty awesome. It's a tall order. We saw a 22.4 yesterday. Now we don't know how much fuel that related to for Michael Schumacher. Let's say he probably had about half what would be for a one-stop race here, so he probably had about 40 kilograms, maybe 50 kilograms of fuel on. What was impressive from Schumacher yesterday was that he was able to do a sequence of runs. He did 3 in particular, where each lap was quicker, and each of those laps was the quickest lap of that session, and that indicates to me that Ferrari have got consistency and speed, but also they were doing it with a lot of fuel on board.
Now let's watch Ralph into the first chicane here. Try and listen to the level of traction control, the sort of misfiring effect that you get out of some of these corners. Coming through the flat-out right-hander at Curva Grande, and now down towards the second chicane.
And that's pretty good. That's certainly his best to date this morning. So it's in this second sector, the 2 Lesmo corners. That's where the time Williams and BMW, Michelin cannot maintain. But in the meantime, Montoya just behind Ralf Schumacher, once again fastest in that first sector.
Yeah, so let's keep an eye on Juan Pablo Montoya. There he is, just uses that curb, and now watch him through the second Lesmo. Watch again how much curb he uses on the exit. Yep, about right. And now heads up to over 215 miles an hour before getting onto the brakes up at the Ascari chicane. But this is a faster chicane. You don't need to get rid of so much speed. Still doing about 90 miles an hour in the first part.
A personal best for Montoya, so he's maybe got to grips with that second sector of the circuit. So let's see how he can finalise this last run down into Parabolica. He's not close enough behind. That's Jenson Button and the Renault just ahead of him, so no problem from aerodynamic interference, but he would like to be close now just to pick up the remnants of whatever toe is. So he should see an improvement in time. He does, and it comes within, well, what, just under 44 thousandths of a second of Michael Schumacher.
Yeah, so very close to the Ferrari now, but Michael's back on track himself, and Michael's just set the new fastest first sector time. We're watching Pedro de la Rosa in the Jaguar here. Let's see him across the line. He goes 6th fastest, so Irvine now 4th and de la Rosa 6th, so the Jaguar's well up there again.
Yes, and that is interesting, because everybody would have assumed that what Jaguar were doing yesterday was on a low fuel load. Well, they could still be in a low fuel load, but at least they're repeating what they did yesterday now this morning, and that's encouraging for Jaguar and everybody who's been working so hard to get that team somewhere, but anywhere off the back row.
What's not so encouraging for the competition, though, is the fact that Michael's going faster again. He is going to beat his existing pace, and I think, John, with this lap, he's likely to go faster than we saw yesterday, so we're looking at the fastest lap of the weekend so far coming up right now from Michael Schumacher. He might even get into the 21s. Let's see, he will cross the line, or not quite, a 1:22.110. He goes half a second faster, more or less, than everybody else.
Yes, and that's quicker than last year's pole time, and he did 22.4 yesterday. So Michael Schumacher on lap 9, well, he's just setting out his marker, and he's looking to be in pole position this afternoon.
On board with Kimi Räikkönen, actually missed a little bit of the second chicane a moment ago. Just bounced over the curve there, but no problems, and continues the lap. As you can see, he's backed off, and that might be as a result of bumping over the chicane there, the second one, so he'll pick up speed once again now to try and go on to a quick lap. Let's watch him at Parabolica.
It's virtually, once he picks up the throttle, almost full throttle.
Yeah, without traction control, really cutting in there, was it?
No, you don't. At that level, you shouldn't require traction control. But we don't know whether he damaged the bottom of the car. Let's have a look and see. Well, he got the lock-up on the inside, on the left. So he just, really almost... well, he missed that part clearly. But now, what about these? These are the strips that the drivers were very unhappy about. But he does a great job. He did very well. Top marks, Kimi.
Nice little slalom there between the speed hubs.
Bring by 3 mil, and I want to go down 1.5 mil on the front right height and down 2.5 on the rear right height.
Well, this is going for a time, believe me. When they start lowering the car like that, they're looking to pick up downforce. So,
presumably, John, taking fuel out as well at this point, so they can afford to drop the right height. It's not the fuel's not pushing the car down onto the road more.
No, what they'll do is they may take some fuel out, but I suspect what they'll do is let the fuel run down.
So let's just take a look now. Jacques Villeneuve in the BAR. The Honda-powered cars were all very evenly matched yesterday. Villeneuve 12th, he was just behind Fisichella. Sato and Panis were also very evenly matched. And last year Villeneuve managed to come through to take the final point, 6th place here in 2001. Let's see what they can do this weekend. He was talking yesterday, obviously clearly feels that he will be driving for BAR next year, but he said, well, he's going to have to do a pretty good job next year because it's very unlikely he'll be driving for them the year after that, and if he's to get a seat in any other team, he's going to have to perform next year. Obviously the relationship between himself and David Richards is enough for a working relationship, but it won't extend beyond the end of next year.
Yeah, I don't really understand why Jacques could even articulate that. I mean, what's he paid to do? He's paid a fortune in the first place, and to say I have to get my finger out and do a good job next year to make sure I'm in contention for 2004. Jacques, you've been paid zillions of dollars over the last 4 years.
Well, that's of course next year will be an interesting pairing between Jenson Button and Jacques Villeneuve at BAR Honda. Something to look forward to, that little inter-team rivalry between them, and I think both again will have plenty to prove So a tough one to call. Jensen with a good long-term contract, however, at BAR, unlike Jacques, who will be on his way out, presumably at the end of next year. Looking at David Coulthard now, he's down in 12th place at the moment. He's completed 8 laps so far in this session, not as many as 1 or 2. Most laps completed by Alex Young. He's completed 12 laps this morning. So the Malaysian making sure he's getting plenty of experience, getting into the rhythm of this Monza circuit where he made his debut in Grand Prix racing 12 months ago.
So with David Coulthard having to do a lot of work to catch up on that he lost, and he went off track at the second Lesmo. And the team indicating there may have been a brake problem, and that's why the back end just snapped around so rapidly, and David was a passenger all the way across the gravel, and he did just touch the barrier, so there wasn't any substantial damage, just minor. Nevertheless, time lost in the limited amount of running that you do get over a Grand Prix weekend before you go into qualifying is very difficult to catch back up.
8th fastest for Coulthard then, so that's an improvement in time for the McLaren Mercedes driver. Fastest across the speed trap just recently has been Felipe Massa, again courtesy with a little bit of a toe coming down that main straight, heading towards the first chicane. And so that's up to the 224 mile an hour mark now. That's all pretty impressive stuff.
In the meantime, Massa's also improving in terms of his sector times. So have a little replay of Jacques Villeneuve. Look at the smoke coming out of those brakes.
We said the brakes take a pounding.
Well, it's not smoke, it's carbon dust coming out as he breaks into that second chicane. So Felipe Massa, improvement in first sector, nothing. And in fact, he's dropped off quite a lot in that second sector, 2.5 seconds down. So he's lost time somewhere between end of sector 1 and the end of that third chicane.
I bet Sauber will be looking forward to getting their hands on this year's Ferrari engine at the end of this season for their next year's campaign. Of course, everything moves ahead, and the Ferrari engine this year has, of course, been extremely impressive, taking on BMW in terms of horsepower. Raikkonen's just moved up, so
What do you think?
the finish. Where the team needs the good input, John, from the driver, asking him, is it set up? Is it the tyres that have caused this imbalance? That's where he needs to be very clear with his answers.
Yeah, and it's a very difficult question to answer because, he's relying on the team telling him certain things. He should give them information, and his information should be clear, concise, and the team should make the decisions. They shouldn't maybe try to lead him into saying something. You could hear he didn't know what answer to give, and with his inexperience, I'm not surprised.
No, that's right. And when the team has experienced a Sauber, as you say, you might expect them to say, well, it's probably the tyres, we know from past experience. Well, they've got to work on that. Olivier Panis heads on around. He's down in 16th place at the moment, so not a particularly competitive showing from the man who'll be switching to Toyota next year, of course. Crossed the line, and he stays down there in 16th for the moment. They're no doubt working on race setup, I would think, at this stage of the free practice sessions. We're only just under 6.5 minutes away, a bit sideways into the first chicane. 6.5 minutes away from the end of this 45-minute session. Only half an hour, remember, between sessions then, and then the second 45 minutes where they build up to qualifying pace.
Jenson Button looks reasonably good as he comes out of that second Lesmo corner. And Jenson looking 15th right now. Trulli is in 10th, 23.7 for Trulli, 24.2 for Jenson. So this, well, it doesn't look on our screen. The data screen doesn't look to show any personal improvements. So Jenson just getting on with the job. He's got a list of chores to do this morning, and when the session ends, no doubt he's coming into the pits. In fact, you see him slowing right down and just blending off, and very easy to overrun the pit lane. Jacques Villeneuve yesterday went through at 76 or something kilometers per hour, and for that little pleasure he got an $8,000 fine.
Good improvement from David Coulthard. He goes third fastest, 22.663. That's only less than a tenth slower than Montoya in the Williams. Of course, this time coming a little later, but nonetheless an impressive pace being shown once again. And I wonder whether McLaren Mercedes will indeed challenge Williams BMW this afternoon, and whether all three teams, with Ferrari as well, might be quite close in qualifying using that Michelin tyre.
Well, I said don't write off McLaren this, maybe because of well, we believe the differences in engine horsepower between Williams and McLaren would favour Williams, but McLaren and Mercedes working very, very hard to not only improve reliability but to get more horsepower, and this is a horsepower circuit above all. It wasn't, I mean, the old chicane wasn't satisfactory. I think this one is even less satisfactory, and it's a problem that there's no real solution to, because there isn't an awful lot of space, and if they want to make sure that the cars are going through the Curva Grande at 190 miles an hour rather than doing 230 miles an hour through it, they've got to put a proper corner in, and in my view any of the chicanes that have been fitted or put in place here at Monza prior to the Curva Grande have never really worked. I don't know what the solution is, but it may involve, Takuma Sato. Does he get away with it? Well, he rode the curb and the gravel on the exit of Lesmo too, and he did get away with it.
It was a bit of a rodeo ride, but he, as you say, managed to just about control things and has continued on around. Meanwhile, just looking on down the list at the moment, you know, Rubens Barrichello, with his problem earlier on with that engine failure, he's the only one I think really to have suffered. Nobody else has spun out of this session. Nobody else has had a major mechanical issue. So Barrichello really, as usual, the unlucky man in this session. And Alex Young, the only man who's slower than Barrichello in the Minardi, although he just has improved his time slightly on a 1:26.112.
Well, Jacques Villeneuve right now the quicker of the two BAR drivers. He's down in 10th. He was actually up to 8th a few moments ago, but that's the speed at which things change in these practice sessions. So changes to the car. That's something I think still got the existing set of tyres on, we believe. So Montoya
very slowly here, isn't he?
Yes, that's the first stage of the first chicane.
You've got enough time to do it.
Maybe locked up going down there.
Might be worth telling him he should not take it too easy turning, because it looks as if the longer the run, the quicker they go.
Remember, they made a big change to the suspension.
Okay, well, make sure you keep the pressures up, yeah? Keep the pressures up.
They lowered the car as they go back to Michael Schumacher. And this is the run back up to the third chicane.
You can also go to lift 2. Wow, and you can potentially change the lift.
Up. A little bit of Williams radio while we're looking still at Michael Schumacher here. Let's see whether he's picking up pace. He does look pretty fast coming out of Ascari, although this lap itself is not going to be anything special. Having been in the pits for around about 9 minutes, he's now back on track again to finish off this session.
Again, running out to the edge of the track slightly earlier than you'd expect, and that indicates that these set of tyres have done a fair bit of running. So he does nonetheless a 23.415, but that's 1.3 seconds away from where he was earlier in this session. A little bit more prudent coming in. Oh, and who's that? And up in the third chicane. That's one of the two Sabos, and it's Heidfeld.
So Nick Heidfeld making a little mistake. We ride now with Ralf Schumacher. Quite a good lap going here. He's half a second down.
And he was right on the limit on the braking. You could see him just fiddling in the steering wheel just to get the car into that first chicane, or that first corner of the third chicane.
So yes, he's pushing very quickly at the moment. Let's see, Ralph has got personal best times in both first and second sectors. So this looks like it might improve things a little bit. Yellow flag is because Villeneuve, I think, has gone off just up there at Parabolica. So you see the yellow lights at the top. Well, he's just stopped apparently. He's not gone off, he's stopped. So across the line goes Ralf Schumacher. In fact, it's an improvement in time, but he stays down in 5th place and he had to back off presumably for the yellows.
This is Nick Heidfeld, the moment we saw just before we went on board with Ralf Schumacher under braking, decides, oh, it's not going to slow down, so he just goes straight across the gravel and onto the grass, and then he'll drive back on to the circuit, hopefully without too much gravel being dragged on. There is Villeneuve's BAR, and that is done at the 2 Lesmo corners.
Yeah.
So Villeneuve, I can't see whether it's Lesmo 1 or 2. I think it is, I don't want to say, I think it's 2 in fact.
Difficult to see that. The fans on the inside getting a good view of that corner. Good place to watch in between the trees. And
that's Lesmo 2, because those are the marks from Coulthard from yesterday.
That's right, yeah. So there's been a little bit of incident and action down there at the Lesmos so far this weekend. Montoya has just put in another better lap, 22.135. You know, he nearly went faster than Michael Schumacher there. But Michael Schumacher himself is on another quick lap. So we're seeing a few changes here just at the end of the 45-minute session. Jack not looking too happy, but at least they've got the opportunity to get the car back to the pits in just a few moments.
So wait and see what Michael Schumacher, as we enjoy Jacques Villeneuve just waving to the fans and wondering now, how am I going to get my car back? There's only 30 minutes between these two sessions.
Yeah, last few cars still finishing off the lap. Pedro de la Rosa here. He's improved on his first sector, but he's now, well, he's still actually on quite a reasonable lap. I wonder if he'll stay out there. I think he's probably backed off now. And I think he's going to be heading back in. Yes, indeed he will. So, yes, and indeed with the session overrunning because of the red flag, of course, we won't even have half an hour between sessions. I'd forgotten about that. We will have somewhat less than that. We're only going to have about 28 minutes or sorry, 20, just over 20 minutes before they're back out again. Oh, look at the amount of grass Nick picked up.
He certainly did, and that's what happens when you go across the grass. And not only that, it does damage as well. That'll be a long session for the Sauber mechanics. They'll have to put the car up on the stands. And Kimi Räikkönen goes across, and well, he stays fourth quickest on a 22.9, his best being 22.899, and he bounces across the curb.
So the end of the first 45-minute session, and again it's Ferrari on top, but the Williams of Montoya was very close in the end, both of them having completed over 10 laps during this session. And now, of course, they will start to work towards the qualifying setup in particular. Unplugging himself from the radio, so we won't get a chance to hear. Patrick doesn't need the radio to tell Juan Pablo what he needs to know, as Eddie Irvine tries to discuss what's going on with the Jaguar. I wonder if they've solved the braking problems. A little bit of shaking of head going on.
Well, he wasn't doing the usual braking problem where you push your hand away from you, indicating you got a problem with a long pedal. But certainly Ferrari and BAR in particular will have a problem, and they've got to get their cars back, and it'll take the best part of 20 minutes to get those cars hoisted on the back of a truck and driven back to the pit lane. And then the work starts in changing an engine, and with only a 45-minute session, I mean, I know you can change engines quickly these days. They'll have engines already fully dressed, which means they come complete with exhaust systems, probably radiators attached as well, gearbox, rear suspension. Nevertheless, 45 minutes, very tall order.
Yes, well, Eddie's had his ongoing difficulties with the car this weekend. It might not be brake problems at the moment, whatever it is. I'm sure that it'll all be solved and sorted before one of our lucky viewers gets to win the Jaguar car at the end of this year. That competition building up towards its climax soon, of course, with only, including this one, 3 Grand Prix to go. And that's going to be a very exciting prize for somebody. Well, we've got fans from all over the world, as ever, here at Monza. It is one of the favourite places to come for motorsport fans from around the world. Just down the road from Milan, so you can enjoy some good Italian food, Italian culture. Let's just go through the times from this morning's session then. Michael Schumacher again on top, but again the Michelin runners tending to fill the top 10 apart from Schumacher. We've got a couple of them in there this time, Massa and Villeneuve. Let's just look through the list. We've got Montoya in the Williams, then Coulthard and Räikkönen in both McLarens. Ralf Schumacher in the second Williams is 5th, ahead of both Jaguars in there. Then Massa, McNish inside the top 10 with the Toyota, so presumably they've solved those handling imbalance problems that he was suffering from yesterday, just ahead of Jacques Villeneuve. Then Trulli and Button, this time they were in the top 10 throughout yesterday, but for the moment both Renaults just outside the top 10. Then Heidfeld, who was struggling yesterday, looks as though that car's going a little better today. Fisichella pretty much where he was during yesterday's free practice. Salo, Panis is behind Button, and we've got Sato, Webber, Barrichello, of course, only completing 4 laps before the engine let go in a pretty big way. And then Alex Young on that 1:26.112, looking to qualify today after missing the last couple of Grand Prix where Anthony Davidson has been at the wheel. Let's look back now over the highlights.